Holy cow, they finally did it. They touched upon a storyline that was established about 33 issues ago, involving Ned Leeds and Roderick Kingsley as the Hobgoblins. I specifically remember at the time, I just desperately wanted them to just touch upon the storylines that they initially created back in like issue 1, involving what happened with Peter and MJ and why they're not together. Eventually we got the entire story and we found out what happened when we got to issue 25, but that's a whole other story with that. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be diving into The Amazing Spider-Man number 48, and if you're enjoying this video at any point, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And without further ado, let's jump right into this comic. As I mentioned, this is a continuation of a storyline that they were creating back about 33 issues ago, where they created a mystery on the Hobgoblin, and the comic had you questioning whether it was Ned Leeds or Roderick Kingsley. In what I believe to be very anticlimactic, it turned out that both of them were being the Hobgoblin and causing chaos. Eventually, Ned Leeds ended up getting arrested, and now currently in this comic, Betty Brant is trying to find the Wrinkler device that caused him to turn into a goblin. In the previous issue, they found the Wrinkler device in one of Roderick Kingsley's facilities. Both Betty Brant and Spider-Man were confronted by the Queen Goblin, and accompanying her were Ben Reilly and Hallows' Eve. This comic continues it with their very specific confrontation. Betty Brant confronts the very Queen Goblin, the one involved in turning her husband into the Hobgoblin, which inevitably ended up ruining her life. Both issues 47 and 48 go into pretty good detail in Betty Brant's perspective. I would say it's actually the most grounded, down-to-earth character in this storyline. She's actually the very specific character that makes this comic very captivating to read. Betty had the courage to run up on the Queen Goblin and attack her for ruining her life. And mind you, the Queen Goblin has this fiery mace, which in this case she does try to use it on her, but Spider-Man prevents her and sends the Queen Goblin flying, effectively keeping Betty out of harm. But may I remind you that Ben Reilly's also in the room, and he willingly walks up to the Wrinkler device and sits down, telling Dr. Kafka to activate the machine. The comic does establish that Ben just trustfully believes Dr. Kafka, the Queen Goblin, that this machine is going to restore his previous memories that he had as Peter Parker. In all reality, it's just going to turn him into a goblin. Ben Reilly is reduced to being overly simplified. I would say he did get a chuckle out of me in the comic, but he's still a very unstructured type of character. Nothing to really define him. Maybe after this point, they do make his character better. Just by the tone at the end of the comic, he sort of seems like he kind of snaps out of it, maybe. That's only because Hallows' Eve has a serious sit-down conversation with him about, not specifically having to rely on being bad or good or what they are. She just wants them to be what they are, I guess. Like I said, these characters aren't very structured. At least they gave Queen Goblin a motive in this comic. Her main goal when being evil is to just turn other people into goblins because she wants to share the pain that she's feeling herself, which alludes to the whole Kraven storyline where Peter ended up getting a goblin persona within his mind. It's actually very satisfying when Spider-Man takes down the Queen Goblin in this comic, referring to her actions back with Kraven and her influence and all that. I've noticed a huge emphasis so far with all the comics and all the news and artwork, cover art that's come out of these ASM comics, where there's a huge emphasis on Spider-Man just being a goblin himself. They seem to be really toying with that idea. It started early in the volume run when Peter ended up getting his own glider from Norman Osborn, and then with the Kraven storyline, you have Spider-Man with an actual goblin personality in his head controlling him, which is where we got the entire black-suited Spider-Man action. It was just him with a goblin persona in his head. And now, in this comic, with the Queen Goblin's goal of turning everyone she can into a goblin, they insinuate multiple times that Spider-Man has used the Wrinkler device. In fact, they state that he possibly used it previously before Ben Reilly, in this comic, jumps right onto the seat. At the very end of the comic, once the Queen Goblin gets defeated by Spider-Man, Spider-Man tells her, "Ben needs help, real help. Not your lies about me and the Wrinkler device." And the Queen Goblin says, before she gets knocked unconscious after getting hit by Spider-Man, "Ha, I lied about many things, but not and knocked out from that point onward, officially confirming in my book that Spider-Man has definitely used the Wrinkler device in some form in the past. I don't know if the Queen Goblin was talking about the fact that Kraven ended up shanking Spider-Man, which passed the Goblin's sins into him, if that's what she was referring to, or if there's a separate moment where Spider-Man actually sat down on the Wrinkler machine and, used it straight up. The only point where I can definitely think Spider-Man may have used the Wrinkler device, maybe, was during that Kraven storyline where he had the Goblin persona, and maybe for whatever reason to amplify whatever effects, the Queen Goblin maybe stepped in and helped Peter get an even more amplified, Goblin persona, or somehow managed to get a dormant Goblin within Spider-Man. The idea of Spider-Man even becoming a form of the Green Goblin just seems incredibly outrageous. If they just write it well, I'm just down for whatever idea they introduce, no matter how crazy it is. I suppose the only downside to that was having to wait an entire 30 issues of just random other arcs before they even touched upon that. Please stop just leaving storylines and then waiting 30 issues and just picking them back up again. What seals the possibility of Peter even having a dormant Goblin persona in him was at the end when Ben Reilly was having that heartful conversation with Hallows Eve about what they are in this universe. Ben Reilly stated, "Oh, by the way, that machine showed me some terrible things. Spider-Man is in a lot of trouble." Now, what could Ben Reilly have seen with that Wrinkler device? Only time will tell with that, ladies and gentlemen. I have mentioned in the past 1 or 2 comics that I enjoyed whatever they're doing with the living brain. Every 1 or 2 pages that they include involving the living brain have definitely intrigued me. Although, to my mistake, I believed that they might have just continue that storyline in some tie-in, but this comic sort of reinforces that they just might continue the living brain story in ASM, because at the very end there's a gathering of all the Sinister Six members and they're planning on taking down the living brain, and in doing so they have to storm Norman Osborn's building. So ladies and gentlemen, here we go again, attacking Norman Osborn's building. It was already attacked once by Kraven, but his entire goal was, I guess, to pass on the Goblin curse back to Norman Osborn. So his entire goal wasn't to do anything else besides that. And then Norman's building got attacked a second time with Dr. Octopus. He didn't have a very specific goal in mind. Nothing was very structured in those comics. I remember reading them and they were definitely lazy feeling. They introduced some interesting concepts like Dr. Octopus now having his new arms with them being able to detach into little octoids. But besides that, nothing to really captivate you. Maybe his goal then was to attack the living brain, and doing it by himself, he failed, so he ended up escaping. The comic doesn't specifically state it, but maybe this is why he's gathered the Sinister Six members to attack Norman's building, and this time be successful. Nevertheless, Norman Osborn's building is getting attacked for the billionth time, ladies and gentlemen. Overall, I thought the comic was very fun, entertaining enough. I really desperately want more characters like Betty Brant in the future. Just characters that are down to earth and feel relatable. Please give us more stuff like that. And do something cool with Ben Reilly. Now that he's loose out and about again, and Spider-Man knows about him, I want Spider-Man to properly be concerned that Ben Reilly's out and about. Have him searching for Ben Reilly, Have him search for Ben. Have him try to connect with him in some way. That would make the Peter character more relatable in the sense that he's just trying to connect with his clone, despite his evil past doings. Maybe that wouldn't work because Chasm just has this evil looking costume and they gotta keep him bad in order to remain that evil looking. Otherwise, if they try to redeem Ben Reilly, maybe they'll change his costume. I just want to see some cool shit from that character. That's all I ask. Anyways, that is all I have for you, ladies and gentlemen. If you enjoyed this video at any point, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.